Good evening, friends. There comes a time when the loudest thing you can do is go silent. Not because you're angry, not because you want revenge, but because the noise around you, the manipulation, the guilt trips, the endless cycles of justification has stolen too much of your peace. And peace is not a luxury. It's a necessity. Sometimes we think being available to everyone, explaining ourselves over and over, being the bigger person is the high road, but the truth is there's power in the pause, and even more power in the boundary that follows it. We grow up believing that strength is loud, that it shouts back, that it defends itself in every room, every text, every argument, that it proves a point, fights to be understood, and never backs down. Real strength whispers, real strength walks away, real strength knows when the conversation is no longer a dialogue, but a battle for power, validation, or control. Silence isn't surrender, it's clarity. It's the deep breath you take when you realize your energy is sacred and not everyone deserves access to it. It's choosing not to participate in the drama, the manipulation, the emotional tug of war that leaves you depleted and questioning your own worth. When you stay silent, you're not giving up, you're taking back your power. You're saying, my peace matters more than being right. My mental health matters more than being heard by someone committed to misunderstanding me. There is a difference between being silent out of fear and being silent out of wisdom. And when you've done the emotional labor, when you've tried to communicate with honesty and grace and you're still met with chaos, dismissal, or disrespect, silence becomes the loudest declaration of self-respect you can make. Silence says, I know my value. I don't need to explain it anymore. It says, I am done proving myself to people who benefit from my confusion. It says, I trust myself enough to walk away without burning down the house on my way out. And in that silence, something beautiful happens. So you hear your own voice again. You hear your intuition again. You begin to heal in spaces where noise used to live. So no, silence is not weakness. It's the fierce, grounded voice of someone who finally knows their worth and refuses to argue for it ever again. Cutting contact is choosing peace over chaos. Let's be honest, cutting contact with someone isn't easy. It can feel cold, it can feel final, it can feel like betrayal, especially if it's with someone you once loved, trusted, or built history with. But sometimes choosing peace means making incredibly painful decisions. We don't talk enough about how exhausting it is to stay connected to people who consistently cause harm. People who dismiss your boundaries, twist your words, drain your energy, or only show up when they need something. You try, you explain, you try again. You give them the benefit of the doubt for the 10th time. But deep down, you're not thriving in that relationship, you're surviving it. That's not connection. That's chaos dressed up as loyalty. Cutting contact isn't about being bitter. It's not about punishment. It's about survival. It's about no longer being willing to bleed just to keep the relationship alive. It's about looking at your life and saying, this is costing me too much. When you cut contact, you're not being cruel. You're being clear. You're saying, I love myself enough to stop explaining my worth to people who only want access, not accountability. I will no longer confuse being needed with being valued. I choose peace, even if it's quiet, even if it's lonely, even if it means letting go of someone I never thought I'd lose. There's a sacred stillness that comes after the chaos is gone. You wake up lighter, you breathe deeper, you don't feel like you're constantly preparing for the next conflict or apology. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You stop second-guessing your instincts. And that peace, that precious, hard-won peace, becomes the evidence that cutting contact wasn't an act of cruelty. It was an act of love for yourself, for your future, for the version of you that's tired of surviving storms that aren't even yours. So, yes, it's hard, but choosing peace over chaos is one of the bravest, kindest decisions you will ever make. Not everyone deserves a front row seat to your life. Some people need to be loved from a distance. Some not at all. Let's talk about boundaries, not the kind that are loud or dramatic, but the quiet, steady ones. The kind that say, this is how I protect my peace. Because at some point in life, you'll set a boundary that someone doesn't like, and they will make you feel guilty for it. They'll say you're being selfish, that you've changed, that you're overreacting. But here's the truth. Setting a boundary is not a betrayal. It's a declaration of self-respect. And you don't owe anyone a full emotional thesis on why you've decided to draw that line. You don't need to defend, justify, or shrink just because someone else finds your boundaries uncomfortable. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. Your healing is. People who are used to benefiting from your lack of boundaries will always be the ones most offended when you finally set them. Let them be offended. Let them talk. Let them call you cold or distant or difficult, because those same people had no problem crossing lines you never gave them permission to cross. You can say no without guilt. You can choose silence without explanation. You can take space without a press conference. A boundary is not a wall, it's a doorway. It says, if you want to be in my life, here's how that has to look. And the people who truly love you, who see you, will honor those doorways, not try to tear them down. And people will call it attitude, some will call it selfish. Call it what you want. But protecting your energy, your time, your emotional safety, that's not selfish. That's sacred. And let's be real. The constant explaining, the over-explaining, the long text trying to justify your need for space, that's usually rooted in fear, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being seen as the bad one. But if someone needs a 10-paragraph essay just to respect your no, they're not respecting you in the first place. You get to decide what is acceptable in your life. You get to change your mind. You get to grow, evolve, and shift without asking permission. And you don't owe anyone an explanation for how you choose to honor your well-being. Say it softly or say it firmly, but say it for you. This is my boundary. I'm not asking for approval. I'm stating a fact. That is power. That is freedom. That is peace. It's easy to feel close to people when you're always the one initiating, when you're the one reaching out, checking in, showing up, being available in all the invisible ways that make relationships feel alive. But what happens when you pause? What happens when you stop being the glue, the bridge, the planner, the fixer, the emotional caregiver? That's where distance becomes your teacher. See, distance doesn't lie. It reveals, it strips away the illusion of mutual effort and shows you what's really there when your energy isn't holding everything together. When you stop chasing people you learn who's walking toward you and who only ever moved when you did. Some people won't notice your silence until it inconveniences them. Some won't check in, not because they're too busy, but because your presence was never something they valued, just something they expected. And others will meet you in the space you created. They'll notice, they'll reach out, they'll fill the gap, and they'll move closer, not out of guilt, but out of care. That's how you learn. Not by who claps when you win, not by who smiles in your photos, but by who shows up when there's nothing in it for them but the chance to keep you close. Distance shows you who was there for the convenience of your presence versus the connection of your soul. And it can hurt. It can make you grieve relationships you once thought were solid. It can make you question what was ever real, but it also brings clarity. It shows you where to stop pouring. It shows you where your absence is just as unacknowledged as your presence, and that's a kind of loneliness you don't deserve. You deserve reciprocity. You deserve people who reach back, who miss you out loud, who make the effort, not just receive it. And you don't have to beg for that. You don't have to perform for it. You just have to step back and watch what happens. So take the space, protect your energy, let distance do the quiet work of truth-telling. Because when you're no longer the one doing all the reaching, the ones who reach back will tell you everything you need to know. And the ones who don't, and they were only holding a version of you that served them, not the real, whole, growing you. And you were never meant to shrink just to stay connected. Not let distance clear the room. What remains is real. We often associate healing with dramatic breakthroughs, big gestures, life-changing conversations, some grand moment of closure. But real healing, the kind that rewires your nervous system, reshapes your beliefs, and reconnects you to yourself, that kind of healing begins in quiet spaces. It starts in the pause between the noise, in the stillness after the chaos, in the silence you once feared but now find oddly comforting. Healing doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't happen under pressure or with an audience. It happens slowly, delicately, when you finally allow yourself to sit with what you've been running from. The confusion, the grief. Say the truth. It happens in the mornings when you wake up and realize you didn't cry yourself to sleep for the first time in weeks. It happens when you say no without guilt and yes without fear. It happens when you take the long way home just to be alone with your thoughts and you're not afraid of them anymore. The quiet isn't empty. It's sacred because it's in that quiet space that you begin to hear your own voice again, not the voice of the critic or the people who hurt you or the version of yourself you felt you had to perform. But your voice, the one that knows what you need, the one that knows what you deserve. Healing is not always beautiful at first. It can be boring. It can feel lonely. It often comes with no external validation, no one clapping for your inner work, no one seeing how much energy it took to not text back, to walk away, to cry it out instead of numbing it down. But make no mistake, those quiet, unseen moments are where the transformation begins. It's where you stop reaching for temporary fixes and start building permanent peace. It's where you stop asking, why did they do that to me? And start asking, why did I keep allowing it? It's where you learn that your value is never tied to who stayed or who left, but to how tenderly you now choose to care for yourself. And the truth is, not everyone will understand the quiet season of your healing. because you won't be as accessible, you won't be as reactive, you won't be available for drama or explanations or energy that pulls you backward. And that might confuse people. Let it. You are not healing for them. You are healing for you. So protect the quiet, nurture it, let it hold you. Because in that stillness, your soul starts stitching itself back together. And one day, without even realizing it, you'll step back into the world whole. Not louder, but stronger, wiser. You're taught to hold on, to endure, to fix, to fight for people, relationships, and commitments, even when they hurt. Even when staying starts to cost us more than we can afford. We're told that letting go is quitting, that it's harsh, that it means we didn't care enough, try hard enough, love deep enough. But the truth is, letting go isn't cruel. It's courageous. It takes far more strength to walk away from something familiar than it does to stay in it out of fear, guilt, or comfort. Letting go means you've finally stopped romanticizing potential and started honoring reality. It means you finally stopped carrying the weight of what could be and started telling the truth about what actually is. And that truth, it can be painful. It means facing the fact that love isn't always enough. That shared history doesn't guarantee a shared future. That sometimes the people we want beside us simply aren't meant to stay. Letting go doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you cared so deeply that you realized you couldn't keep bleeding for something that refused to heal. It's not about bitterness, and it's about boundaries. It's saying, I deserve peace. I deserve reciprocity. I deserve a version of love that doesn't leave me questioning my worth. And yes, it can feel like loss. You might grieve the memories, the connection, the imagined future. You might replay the good times and wonder if you made a mistake. But slowly, the grief makes room for relief, and the absence makes room for clarity. And you begin to see it wasn't cruel to choose yourself. It was necessary. Because staying in something just to avoid discomfort isn't loyalty, it's self-abandonment. Letting go is choosing growth over stagnation. It's choosing your future over your fear. It's believing that there is more waiting for you on the other side of the pain, more alignment, more freedom, more truth. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for them and for yourself is to walk away without bitterness and without blame. Just a quiet, steady decision to stop losing yourself in the name of saving something that was never yours to hold forever. So if you're there on the edge of goodbye, don't let shame hold you back. You are not heartless for choosing peace. You are not cruel for creating space. You are not weak for needing more. Letting go may feel like the end, but more often than not, it's the beginning. The beginning of coming home to yourself, the beginning of breathing freely again, the beginning of a life that honors your heart, your boundaries, and your worth. It is not cruel. That is courage at the intersection of silence, boundaries, distance, and letting go. This isn't a call to isolate yourself or live in bitterness. This is a reminder that your peace is not negotiable, that your energy is sacred, and that you are allowed to protect both, even if it means walking away from people you once thought you couldn't live without. There will be moments where silence feels unnatural, where distance feels lonely, where letting go feels like failure. But I promise you, those are the same moments where strength is born. Because every time you choose yourself, you're rewriting a story. You're breaking cycles. You're saying, I am no longer available for what hurts me. And that's not cruelty. That's healing. That's courage. That's growth. So be silent when silence is what saves you. Cut contact when connection costs too much. Stand firm in your boundaries without guilt. Watch who remains when you stop reaching. Heal in the quiet, even when no one's clapping. And when it's time to let go, do it with grace, but do it completely. You owe no one your pain for the sake of their comfort. You owe no one your presence at the cost of your peace. You owe yourself everything you spent years giving away too freely. It is not the end of love. This is the beginning of love that includes you.